This is the story of an American middle-class family whose home base for half a century has been a modest Cape Cod house just off Wilcott Hill Road in the historic Hartford suburb of Wethersfield, Connecticut. This is the way the family looked in their fair acre front yard in 1965. Robbins was father, and Margaret, or Meg, was mother. The three children for whom this video chronicle about the way they started out was produced were Mary Elizabeth, David Robbins, and Daniel Barstow. The family had had its beginnings 2 decades earlier, back in 1942, when Robbins and Margaret were united in marriage. Robbins Wilcott Barstow, Jr. then lived in Hartford, Connecticut, having been born on October 24, 1919. He attended Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, as a member of the class of 1941. Here he is crossing the campus with his ever-present briefcase. He majored in English and philosophy. Margaret Louise Vanderbeek was living in Plainfield, New Jersey then, her date of birth having been April 22, 1921, making her 1½ years younger than Robbins. Margaret went to Mount Holyoke College in South Hadley, Massachusetts, in the class of 1942, majoring in sociology and economics. She is in the left background of this group of classmates, wearing a red dress. A better close-up of her is coming up there. In this scene, she is up front on the right. Robbins and Margaret first got acquainted at an inter-college conference in the winter of 1941. A year and a half later, they had convinced themselves that they knew and enjoyed and loved each other enough and shared personal, social, and religious values deeply enough to join together as lifetime partners. They were married on the 18th of September, 1942, in the Unitarian Church in Margaret's hometown of Plainfield, New Jersey. They borrowed Meg's father's car from New Jersey and drove up to a beautiful lakeside cottage in Vermont for their honeymoon, stopping in Hartford, Connecticut on their way to visit Robbins' family in their home and be greeted by his father and his mother and his brother John. They were served a delicious breakfast out in the backyard, and they had the opportunity to show off the 2 rings resulting from their double ring wedding ceremony. On their honeymoon, they enjoyed swinging together as permanent partners now, before heading back into the real world of work and everyday living. Before starting the new jobs they had secured in New York City, they stopped for another visit at Meg's home in Plainfield, New Jersey, where they enjoyed a magic hot dog picnic in the backyard with her family. This is Meg's mother, her sister Betty, her brother Bob, and Meg herself. Her older brother Jim was not here on this occasion, but everyone was happy to welcome Meg's father when he arrived home from work. Meg and Robin spent their first year together as social workers at a settlement house in New York City. The Hudson Guild Neighborhood House was located in Chelsea, a west side area of the city which was known as Hell's Kitchen. They lived in a second-floor railroad apartment on West 28th Street, and each of them was paid $25 a week. Meg had been offered a position as girls group worker, and since Robbins was exempt from the draft, he was able to fill a need for boys group worker. They were responsible for developing a variety of constructive after-school activity programs for both young children and high school youths living in the area. This was during the first years of the United States involvement in World War II. Robbins had registered as a conscientious objector, but because of a chronic blood condition which had required the removal of his spleen, he had been classified 4F, physically ineligible for the draft, but he was still able to actively involve himself in neighborhood youth activities. After 1 year of trying settlement house social work there on the sidewalks of New York, Robbins and Meg decided to set out in a new direction, and they both got jobs as teachers and counselors at a private progressive boarding school in Paulding, New York, not far from the Hudson River. There, they were responsible for mentoring a very active, bright, and talented bunch of teenagers with whom they lived in a large house made into a dormitory. The school's director, William Fink, had an old, dilapidated Jeep, which he sometimes used to transport students and staff from classroom buildings to dormitories on the extensive school grounds. On one occasion, a married teacher needed a ride for his young daughter. So Bill agreed to have everybody else get out of the car if they could open the door. It may or may not be possible to distinguish students from staff members in this motley crew disembarking from the Jeep, but it should be evident that the school harbored a wide variety of individualistic young people who enjoyed mixing fun with their learning. Many of the students came from well-to-do but broken homes, some of them the children of prominent authors and other professional people. One of the Manumit students we taught, Charlotte Gerke, later went on to become a Hollywood movie actress under the name of Susan Oliver. It was quite a challenge keeping track of all of them, but Meg here and Robbins did survive, and it turned out that a total of 28 bodies, including the dog, had exited the Jeep that day, so that the teacher's young daughter could have her ride, leaving the others to walk. Robbins had now decided to pursue a career in education, and in fact he studied summers at New York University to secure a master's degree in education and become certified for public school teaching. The following year, the Manumit School moved to a new location in Bristol, Pennsylvania, north of Philadelphia. By that time, Meg and Robbins had decided to start a family. Robbins continued teaching innovative high school English and history classes, and Meg did creative artwork with the students at this new site. Then that fall, they received a visit from Robbins' younger brother, Paul, who was on his way to Army duty in Europe. Paul brought with him in his duffel bag 2 pairs of socks, which had been hand-knitted by Robbins' father. One pair was for Robbins, and the other pair was for an eagerly awaited new member of the family, soon to be delivered. The visit was brief, but mission accomplished. And shortly thereafter, on the 18th of October, 1944, the first child of Meg and Robbins Barstow, whom they named Mary Elizabeth, was born at the Nazareth Hospital in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Meg's younger brother, Bob, was on hand to greet the new arrival when Meg brought her home from the hospital to the school. Meg's Vanderbeek parents came to admire the baby, too. a tiny bundle of infinite possibilities, cherished and treasured by both father and mother. At an early date, Megan Robbins took Mary to her Barstow grandparents' new home in Stamford, Connecticut, for a visit with Robbins' mother, Dorothy, and also Robbins' other brother, John. Back at the Manumet School campus in Pennsylvania, Mary was getting acquainted with the young children of other faculty members and developing her social graces. Then came the sunshine of Mary Elizabeth's first spring, with a soft and gentle Easter bunny. The little girl's dad was such an avid movie maker that when she rolled off her blanket and started hollering, instead of stopping to help her, he kept right on filming to get this dramatic shot. From her earliest months, Mary exuded vibrant life and active happiness. She seemed to have a built-in smile. Have you ever wondered what adoring parents look like to a baby? Blue was a favorite color for this young family. When Mary was still less than a year old, she and her parents again visited the spacious home and backyard of her Barstow grandparents in Stamford, Connecticut. When she was on her own, she didn't crawl on her hands and knees, but almost always bare-walked on hands and feet. Robbins' father, Robbins Wolcott Barstow Sr., had built a little box swing for Mary, hung from the branch of a backyard tree. There appears to be no doubt that Grandpa enjoyed pushing his granddaughter in the swing as much as she enjoyed being pushed. From her earliest childhood, Mary liked books and reading or being read to. Her grandmother Barstow loved being with her, too. Each new step along the way delighted this young adventurer. She also loved going for an elephant ride on her father's back among the croquet wickets on the expansive lawn there in Stamford. Dismounting presented a challenge, but as always, this little lady managed to meet it. Mary celebrated her first birthday, appropriately enough, in her birthday suit on the lawn back at Manumet. she was still using the bear walk technique for locomotion, using both hands and feet at the same time. But she was also learning to stand up on just her 2 feet, all by herself. There were a number of other faculty children at the school to help Mary party, and when her 1-year birthday cake was set before her, she started a Barstow children's tradition by grabbing handfuls of frosting from the top of the cake before it was cut up for distribution. By the time of her 2nd Christmas, at the different residence which her mother's Vanderbeek parents had now moved to, still in Plainfield, New Jersey, Mary was learning to walk a few steps, standing up on her own, even bundled up in a close-fitting snowsuit on a snowy sidewalk. But whatever happened, she was always determined to get where she wanted to go, one way or another. Visiting her other grandparents in Stamford for the holidays, she indeed gave the family a very merry Christmas. She liked riding on her father's shoulders, and despite the cold, seemed to enjoy becoming acquainted with various Christmas toys, even if the snow caused an occasional misstep. It was here, when she was just a little more than 1 year old, that her mother introduced her to what became her favorite Christmas poem, The Night Before Christmas, reading from a large illustrated book with exciting pictures of 8 colorful reindeer pawing the ground. The next spring, Mary's Uncle Paul returned to the Manumet School campus from his Army service in Europe for another brief visit, but little Miss Independence had other things on her mind. By this time, she was a real walker as well as a real charmer. In 1946, after 3 years at Manumet, Robbins completed his master's work at NYU and became certified for public school teaching in Connecticut. So the family then moved to the small Connecticut river town of Essex, where Robbins taught English and social studies at the Pratt Public High School. They were welcomed at the Essex Congregational Church and took up residence on Mack Lane, down near the riverfront. Meg had made a new blue outfit for Mary, which she was pleased to show off. They had rented a small bungalow on a corner lot with nice stone steps and a side room where Robbins had his study. Here Mary spent a year, notice the off-the-shoulder effect with this dress, of mostly carefree and happy early childhood. These steps led to the kitchen door above the garage where a neighbor kept his car because they didn't have one themselves then. Across the cove was the residence of Ambassador Chester Bowles, who later became governor of Connecticut for 1 term. Singing was a favorite pastime for Mary, even at this early age and without a full set of teeth. Learning how to wink was a little more difficult. It was thought that this kind of vigorous outdoor exercise might go to Mary's head, but she did seem to thrive on it, and it may even have added a little to her height as she grew older. Springtime offered opportunities for various kinds of outdoor play, including bathing in an old-time washtub. The family's next-door neighbors, the Warners, had 2 children around Mary's age, Bumpy and Brenda, and they enjoyed playing together a good deal of the time. One of their favorite activities was just splashing around in an outdoor concrete pool. When summer came, Robbins worked as a short-order cook at an ice cream parlor on the Essex boat dock. But then in August, there was some exciting news to share with neighbors Giff and Enid Warner. Mary was going to have a new baby brother or sister, and when the time came, her father would need to borrow the neighbor's car to drive her mother to the hospital in Middletown. And sure enough, on the 5th of August, 1947, David Robbins Barstow was born at the Middlesex Hospital in Middletown. This was another big date for the Barstow family. It had been a nervous wait for the then chain-smoking Robbins, who at that time was not allowed into the delivery room. But at 2:30 a.m., the doctor announced the safe arrival of a baby boy. A boy! Oh, boy! David spent the first few weeks of his life at the Essex home site, getting acclimated to the warmth of the summer air and to the warmth of his family's love. At times, David did seem to be a bit bored by it all, but he was getting off to a good start. At the same time that David was born, his parents gave Mary a new lifelike doll, which she called Sweeties, so that she'd have something special to look after, too. After just 1 year at Essex, Robbins had secured a new 8th grade teaching position in the shoreline town of Niantic, Connecticut, where the family was to reside for the next 4 years. Their first dwelling place in Niantic was a small apartment on top of a 2-car garage belonging to the family of one of Robbins' students. It was somewhat crowded for a family of 4, but down the stairs they had access to a wide yard to play in. And David found his bassinet a comfortable place from which to contemplate the world around him as he was getting to know the members of his family. By the time of Mary's 3-year birthday in October, she had made friends with several neighborhood children of her own age, and they came over to watch her blow out the candles on her cake and have fun chasing each other around the yard. Wintertime required bundling up in warm clothing, but the year passed quickly, and when August came around, it was time for David to celebrate his first birthday. David was obviously very excited about it. Meg, of course, had made another cake, and Mary brought along her doll, Sweeties, to share in the one-year event also. True to the Barstow children's tradition, David immediately grabbed a handful of frosting from the top of the cake and started to eat it. Also attending the party were the town's young Methodist minister, William Rhodes, and his wife, Margaret, and their 2 small children. They wanted to know if David had learned yet how to blow out a candle. He had. Accidents of all kinds do happen, but that didn't stop David from enjoying his frosting. During the summer, a familiar sight on the main street of Niantic was Meg pushing David in his stroller, accompanied by Mary holding Sweeties, on their way to an outing at the town beach. Passing through the hole in the wall underneath the railroad track, they were able to cool off on hot days in the ocean water of Long Island Sound. This was the saltwater locale where both Mary and David received their first informal swimming lessons. If anything, young David was even more enthusiastic about it than his sister Mary. She liked hitching a ride on her dad's back. Another fun summer activity was going for a ride on the carousel and other attractions at a visiting carnival. During Robin's second year of teaching at Niantic Grammar School in the fall of 1948, a big change in the family's living arrangement came underway. At a hillside site on Meadow Street, a home of their own for the Barstow family was under construction. With the assistance of a loan from Robin's father, they had contracted for a 2-story house to be built at a location within easy walking distance of the school. And it was here, while the building was going on, that David started learning to walk with the help of his mother and sister. Raising the front wall of a new house is one of the most exciting and dramatic moments in its construction. The whole crew of carpenters has to lift the wooden framework from the floor to a vertical position, matching it up perfectly with the other sides. As the building progressed through the winter months, the two children frequently visited the site, continuing to perfect their independent walking skills. Then, finally, in February 1949, the construction was done, and the 4 Barstows were able to move into their own home for the first time. To save money, they had had to leave half of the second floor unfinished, but both Mary and David each had a separate room of their own. In the big backyard, the family used their ingenuity and imagination to create a fancy playground with a wide variety of homemade equipment. Their creative playscape included a horizontal bar, a swing, a seesaw, a large doll's house, and a realistic-looking train engine made from old crates and rubber tires with instruments from an old washing machine. They even put up a canopy to cover an abandoned rowboat, which they had turned into a sandbox. The family's first live pet was a lady cat named Stripey, and one summer evening, in the hall closet, she gave birth to kittens, which both Mary and David delighted in holding, petting, and playing with. The biggest event of the summer in 1950 was going to the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus, which had pitched its giant tents in a large lot in the nearby city of New London, Connecticut. Of course, the children came away with gaudy souvenirs. The family attended the Methodist Church in Niantic, and Robin's father, who was himself a minister, was pleased to meet the local preacher, William Rhodes, after church on a weekend visit with Robin's mother and brother John. When David was nearly 3 years old and Mary was 5 1/2, a new house was built across from the Barstow home on Meadow Street. David had become fascinated by big machines like bulldozers and trucks and steamrollers, which he called deem-dums. He was greatly interested in trying to figure out just how they worked. Even at this early age, the Barstow children were being groomed for college, though it later turned out that both David and Mary attended colleges other than their parents, Dartmouth and Holyoke. Keeping physically fit was an important part of growing up, and the front lawn and steps proved to be good spots to practice somersaulting and jumping. Mary was tall enough to jump off the top step, and David was smart enough to just jump from the second step. The kids had helped their dad make these stone concrete driveway steps. Within easy walking distance from their Niantic house was a freshwater swimming hole known as Dodge Pond, which provided continuing opportunities for having fun in the water and for practicing various kinds of beginners' swimming strokes. A bunch of neighborhood kids attended David's 3-year birthday party, and he still maintained the tradition of covering his face with frosting from the cake. David also at this age was typically attracted to playing with a pistol as part of the American way. In the fall of 1950, Mary skipped happily off to the Niantic Grammar School to attend first grade. This was her first exposure to formal education, and she was most fortunate to have a wonderful first-grade teacher, Jerry Randler, who, with her husband Ed, had become good friends of Mary's parents. That year, Meg organized a 3-morning-a-week nursery school at their house, which filled a real need in town as there was no public kindergarten at that time. David, of course, was one of the pupils. During his years as a teacher in Niantic, Robbins had become increasingly active in the local Teachers Association and also on committees of the statewide Connecticut Education Association, the state teachers' professional organization, which had its headquarters in Hartford near the state capitol. On October 1st, 1950, Robbins made his final career change and decided to leave classroom teaching to work full-time at the state level to seek to improve education and help teachers and students professionally throughout the state. He had already done considerable lobbying at the state capitol on a volunteer basis on behalf of education legislation, and now he was very happy to be appointed to the CEA staff on a permanent basis. With the congratulations and best wishes of fellow teacher John Benjamin, he was ready to assume his new duties just a block away from the Capitol at the old Connecticut Education Association building housed at 21 Oak Street. Working with Executive Secretary Lyndon Pratt and Research Director Wilfred J. Sheehan, Robbins became Director of Field Services and Professional Development and remained with the CEA until his retirement 34 years later in 1984. Back at their home in Niantic, Mary and David were also eager to congratulate their father and to celebrate in the front yard with some interchangeable ankle swings and shoulder rides. For the first time in the 8 years of their marriage, Robbins and Meg now had a car of their own, and the family drove to Hartford on a holiday quest for a new place to live. They wanted a permanent residence near Hartford, and in the ancient Connecticut river town of Wethersfield, just south of Hartford, on Stillwell Drive between Silas Deane Highway and Wolcott Hill Road, at the corner of Stillwell Drive and Coleman Road, they found a perfect location. On this hilltop corner lot, again with the help of a further loan from Robbins' father, they contracted with local builder H. Newton Griswold, Jr. to have a 2-story Cape Cod frame house constructed to their detailed specifications with blueprints they had ordered through the mail. Evacuation for the garage and full cellar were begun in December 1950 and continued for a number of days. Bulldozers from the Morgan farm in Griswoldville did the bulk of the digging. When the wall forms were all in place, the cement mixers were brought in and the cellar floor and foundations were poured. The house was nearly square with base dimensions of 31 feet by 33 feet. This was a most interesting process. And the official overseer for the pouring project was none other than 3.5-year-old David Robbins Barstow, who, with his expertise in steam shovels and other heavy equipment, was an ideal supervisor. After the floor had been laid on top of the concrete foundation, the wooden sidewalls were erected. We were impressed with the casual skill with which the builders added each new plank. Once again, there was an exciting and dramatic moment when all the carpenters lined up together and raised the frame for the front of the house, making sure that the corners fit perfectly. Though the family was still living in Niantic, Robbins would periodically drive Meg and the two children up to Wethersfield so they could keep track of the building's progress. One of the gratifying aspects of having chosen this location was that it was less than a mile away from the 150-year-old homestead of Robbins' great-grandfather, Robert Robbins Wolcott, whose large house at 261 Wolcott Hill Road was still being used. The house was designed so that there would be 4 bedrooms, 2 on the first floor and 2 on the second. Robbins and Meg wanted to be sure that each of their children had a room of their own. The second story had 2 single dormers on the front side, and a shed dormer on the back to provide for optimum space utilization. Work on the house continued through the winter and into the spring, and the original siding was of shingles. There were enough warm and sunny days during the winter for the construction to proceed at a vigorous pace. On their early visits to Wethersfield, David and Mary were a little bit worried about being lonely and missing their old friends. Mary wondered about finding new playmates and getting to know other neighborhood children. Once she had said hello, however, out in the backyard, she found the neighborhood to be very friendly. And in fact, it didn't take long before David, waiting alone in the front yard, found himself almost overwhelmed by all of Mary's new friends. One of the last building jobs was putting up the brick chimney for the fireplace on the north side of the living room. And when the chimney was completed, they added color, painting the shingles white and with a bright blue roof. Contractor Newt Griswold was very pleased with the way the house had turned out, and so was Robbins, with only a few minor agreed-upon changes in the blueprints. Meanwhile, back in Niantic, when the school year ended, another momentous event was about to take place. The date was July 4th, just 175 years after the United States Declaration of Independence had been signed by a related Connecticut patriot, Oliver Wolcott, back in 1776. Now it was 1951, and another Wolcott was about to appear on the scene. Daniel Wolcott Barstow, who was born on the 4th of July, 1951, at the Lawrence Memorial Hospital in New London, Connecticut. Mary and David were eager for their first look at their new baby brother outside the hospital when they went in to bring him home. Again, so that each of them would also have something special to take home and care for, Mary was given a new older girl doll, and David a dangling bear doll. Meg's mother, Catherine Vanderbeek, came up from New Jersey to help Meg during the first couple of weeks after Daniel was born. Getting to know him was something of a challenge for his two older siblings. Mary tried singing a lullaby to baby Dan, and David wasn't sure just what to do or say. Daniel himself was learning how to communicate in various elemental ways, while the whole family was getting everything ready to make the big move up to their new home, by this time almost entirely completed, in Wethersfield. Making such a big change with so young a baby was a stressful circumstance, but Meg, who had also nursed Mary and David when they were babies, kept Daniel well fed and cared for, even giving him outdoor baths. Finally, on July 30th, 1951, the American dream came to fulfillment for Robbins and Meg Barstow and their three children, Mary, David, and Daniel, as they all moved into their new and permanent home at 190 Stillwell Drive in Wethersfield, Connecticut, on a plot of land they called Fair Acre. Their next film, Chronicle, documents their further life together when we were very young.
We hope you've enjoyed this Barstow travel adventure film. We'll be releasing more of Robbins Barstow's home movies on this YouTube channel during 2021. Click here to subscribe and receive the latest updates. Meanwhile, enjoy these other films by a master of home movie storytelling in the pre-digital era.